Confidential. Okay. All right. Welcome everyone. I'm gonna give just a few minutes. It's 5:30 exactly right now, so maybe we'll wait a couple minutes to let a few more folks trickle in. Thank you for joining us, and we'll start soon.
Cool.
I should have had like music or something playing right now.
Live and learn. Hey, we're happy to be your baptism by fire and
Why
diverging.
don't we just talk? Why don't we just talk? Because there's nothing else going on, so we might as well. Just...
People are like coming in. I'm a little spooked out. There's the picture of my roommate, my gay, very like he's really into social justice roommate, and someone like he's like put a big picture of himself on the wall, and that looks really like everyone's like, who is that? Like, that's my roommate.
Cool
we're not narcissists, and there's a picture of me on the other side, which is just totally weird. But no one comes over because it's a pandemic. Hi.
Is over. My apartment was being painted today, so this is like fresh paint. It's still wet.
Oh, good. Hi, are you high?
One should be for a recovery related webinar, right? Yeah. No, I'm good. But it's been a pain because they scrape. So like meetings today, they're scraping. It's loud. What can you say? We have like 55 people. I'll wait like another minute.
Wait, we have 65 people here?
55.
55. Okay. Where are they? I don't see.
No,
I guess we don't see.
We're not going to see them.
Okay. Hello, people. How are you? Okay. Oh, you can see them. Okay.
Right. So
okay.
You see. So
right. You're the. Okay.
I'm hoping that our enemies come on, Joe.
Oh, well, I was wondering about that. I was actually like, what if there's
here's
some
Wendy.
rehab people?
A couple questions. There you go.
Oh, actually, okay. I forgot. This is what I was going to do. So as folks are trickling in, if you want to introduce yourself on chat or maybe tell us where you are. But I think we have people who are, some of whom are my students. I think some of whom are your fans, Amy.
Oh, awesome.
From the podcast and from the book. But yeah, if you guys want to tell us where you're from, that would be cool. I have an idea in the chat.
Here, let me open up chat so I can see. You know how to open chat, Joe?
No.
Okay, at the bottom, click on the chat. See the chat? See the chat at the bottom?
Yeah,
participants chat.
I can read it.
You click it, and like a thing opens up on the side.
Oh, wait, I see. Okay.
There you go.
Right.
Hi, guys.
Yeah.
Lindsay from
Wendy
Canada.
sent a couple questions. Good evening, you guys. Good afternoon. Wow.
Brooklyn, Queens, New York, Stamford.
Emily, fan of Amy's. Hi,
Santa Barbara. Okay.
Very nice. Jersey in the house.
Woo.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, Princeton. Good.
So good mix of folks.
There's Beryl. Hi, Beryl.
Portland, San Bernardino.
Oh, Jen. JV, what's up, girl?
Abby from Brooklyn. I miss bagels for some reason. I don't know why they can't do it in Los Angeles, but they can't. So
there's a student of yours.
Right.
She really enjoyed the book. Thank you.
Bergen
a lot has changed. I need to write book too. Yeah.
Bergen bagels. All right, let's get started. So we've got like, just so you guys know, there's about 70 people now. So I think we should begin.
Hey, bro. I'm so stoked. The book was amazing. Oh, thanks, guys.
She's my student, actually.
Aww.
So
other people are gonna send questions.
There is
be a good essay groups.
Yeah,
there's already some interesting questions.
Definitely submit your questions via the Q&A, or probably the Q&A is better than using the chat because we have all this other intro stuff happening. But everyone, welcome to our talk tonight with Amy Dresner and Joe Schrank. host of the podcast Rehab Confidential. So they'll be talking to us today about their experiences with addiction, with recovery, also speaking about probably a little bit about Amy's book, which many of my students have just recently read this past week. But yeah, let me give you a chance to introduce yourselves to our Fordham GSS community. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got into this field. What was the motivator, apart from having lived the experience, which I'm sure is a big part of it.
I think it's different for both of us. You want to go first, Joe? Ladies first.
Age before beauty. You feel free. Go ahead. I don't. Whatever.
I am a recovering everything addict, and I feel very comfortable with the word addict. I think we get to tell our own. We get to identify ourselves the way we want to identify ourselves. It's our own story. Do you know what I mean? And I respect other people who want to use SUD, but that doesn't feel for me authentic. You know, to what I've been through. I started off as a recovery journalist, I guess, for a magazine, a website that Joe started originally, but we didn't know each other. When did you start The Fix?
I started The Fix, I think, in 2010, and I was fired from The Fix in 2011. So
okay, so I started writing for it in 2012, so we never met. Okay, so
no, I'd been fired from my creation by then. Yeah.
So I started writing for them, a bunch of other recovery magazines, a bunch of mainstream magazines, and then as a bunch of I got as you've read the book, I got arrested for felony domestic violence when I was high on OxyContin, and I lost everything and went to jail, and was given 240 hours of community labor, and it was very weird to I've lived both sides of everything. Like everything I thought would never happen to me happened to me. As like a nice Jewish girl from Beverly Hills, like I lost everything and like got a felony charge and became an IV drug addict. And I mean, it was like very, lost everything, was on Medi-Cal disability. And so everyone loved the articles and they were like, write a book. And so I did. I pitched a book and they said yes, and they published it. And that led to me being on podcasts and speaking gigs and that kind of stuff, and kicking around the second book idea. And the first book is being developed as a series. And then, so I don't actually work in treatment, except that a lot of people contact me because of the book and ask me questions because they feel close to me because I was so vulnerable in the book. Yeah. And then Joe's ex-girlfriend and baby mama was like, you guys need to do something together. And we were like, okay. So we met and Rehab Confidential was born.
Well, let me jump back to earlier in your story, because I started working in this field in court-mandated substance abuse treatment, right? So folks who are like usually first-time drug offenders, usually petty offenses, really. And yeah, what do you think about that? Like, what do you think about being compelled to do something by the law? Like, how does that potentially impact people's motivations to stay sober or to be clean? Like, is there a strong enough enforcer, basically?
Yeah, my arrest had nothing to do with drugs at all. My arrest was completely domestic violence.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right,
so,
sorry.
Yeah,
right.
So, but I did get sober because I lost everything. And so sort of once, after 25 years of relapsing, and once every rug was pulled out and everyone had boundaries with me, and my father was just like, we're tired of you at the bottom of the well. And, I called him trying to manipulate him. And he was just like, you used to be able to ruin my life. Now you can't ruin my lunch. And no one had money, and everyone was emotionally over it. And I was 42 years old too. And I just kind of like, sweeping the streets was pretty humbling, but I had an epiphany about my life doing that. And I don't know that everyone does that. So I don't know that it's effective. I know people that have gotten clean from jail, and I know many, many people who have not.
Right.
So I had an epiphany where I was like, I'm 42 and like, this could be the best thing that ever happened to me if I choose. And like, all my consequences, like this is the consequences of your actions, and it's something about you. Sure, you can say your ex is an asshole or the police are horrible or blah, but there's, you know, the pattern's following you, so you've got a part in this. Maybe we'll want to look at it. And that was really that last house on the block. If I got kicked out of that sober living, I was going to be homeless, and that was going to be the end. And there are people that continue on, but I just was like, I don't know. I decided to really embrace it. And for me, I needed to lose everything to really get it. And I pray that isn't the case for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, well, I saw something, I think that you guys posted on from your podcast about, I believe is it Colorado, where there's basically been decriminalization of
Oregon.
Oregon.
Well, Oregon just passed Measure 110, which is decriminalization of all personal use drugs. So.
Oh, okay, Oregon.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is I think an interesting case. Like there may be do you want to say something about it? Go ahead.
Well, I think that I am all for treatment alternatives, right? I'm all for disentangling people from the judicial system when the issue in the community is a mental health issue. What I think gets to be sticky is the presumption that any drug use is crime. And I've been convinced of many things about drug use. I've never been convinced that drug use in and of itself is a criminal activity. So some of those folks are funneled into those systems because of a possession charge. It gets to be very it's like, well, why is everybody here black? Like there are lots of white people who also have possession charges. So why is everybody, so that becomes an immediate issue. The other thing is, well, what do they do with that information? A lot of the treatment mandates are funneled into either community-based, peer-supported, which means AA to most people, and or some kind of treatment system that is very AA heavy. So I don't know how you legislate or court mandate a belief in God. So that it gets, there are very tricky twists and turns in this. I'm all for social work, theory, and practice being implemented into the community as a measure of safety. But I think that one of the things with those types of programs is we just have to take a big step back, and we need to collectively have an idea about what drug use is and what it isn't. And most people are unimpaired recreational users of substances. So the inherent use of any substance does not mean pathology or crime. It could, right? Lots of people, and I tell a lot of the people that I work with, well, you can't be arrested for being an alcoholic, but you can be for acting like one. So where is the line about, are you breaking the social contract? Those kinds of issues become very prevalent very quickly. So I think police should catch, like murderers, I don't know, rapists. How about any rapists out there, or you just want to get the kids smoking weed in the park? And not that I don't think that we should address those kinds of community safety issues of drug use in public spaces. I just don't think it's the kind of thing that requires going before a judge and being ordered to do something. So it's a long way of saying there aren't really easy answers with any considerations in addiction to recovery. I don't want to bore you with a bunch of history, but this has been going on for a long time with trillions of dollars, and there actually hasn't really been any meaningful or measurable change in drug use impairment in decades. So we kind of aren't, there's something not right systemically in the whole big machine.
Right. I think the actual enterprise of addiction treatment is so imprecise, right? We know
Correct.
that even with the best, interventions that have, had the most money pumped into them for studies and whatnot, are shown to be most efficacious for whatever reasons. A lot of times the effects a year, 3 years especially out, are gone, right?
Correct.
So a lot of behaviors
That's
have
correct.
returned, relapse occurs. And so one version of this is saying that, which, of course you're familiar with, saying that, okay, well, relapse is part of the cycle of addiction. So this happens and we should expect this, and that's how it works. Or another way to is we're actually pretty shitty at doing this, and we don't really know what works well. And
well, I mean, and well, look, I mean, what other area of healthcare rests on a 3 to 5% success rate? You know, I don't see any oncologists saying, well, we're successful 3 to 5% of the time at getting people into remission from leukemia. So, you know, we're good. We'll just stick with that. We'll stick with 95% failure. I think that part of the question is nobody can really define success, right? So success in recovery is a deeply personal thing, and it changes from community to community, culture to culture, family to family, system to system, and all the way down to the individual. I personally have a broader and sort of more social work heavy definition of success. And it's one of the reasons that I am a pariah in the $45 billion a year rehab industry, is that if here in California, if we can get a young person from injectable heroin use to medicinally dispensed cannabis use, I feel like, well, we've triumphed, right? Nancy Reagan doesn't like that, and the drug office of ONDCP, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, doesn't like that. Schools don't like it. Parents don't like it. So the whole idea of there only being one solution to substance misuse, being total abstinence in perpetuity and going to a church basement for shitty coffee and 1930s folklore with a, an act of providence. If that's the only way we're going to tell people they're successful, we're failing far too many people. And so that's one of the biggest, I think, with the podcast that Amy and I started, one of the biggest goals was, let's look at a few other roads to Damascus here, right? Let's see how people do get better in a bunch of different ways. Let's not marginalize people for not doing, because in a way it's like, well, you will be abstinent. You must be abstinent. That's not treatment. That's gay conversion therapy. And it's ineffective, and it does not respect the individual's right to self-determine, right? Which is a unyielding paradigm of social work theory and practice, that they get to make the choice of how they want to live. We don't get to mandate how they should live or how we prefer for them to live or what they would, what makes us comfortable. Those are all really, those are red herrings rife with a lot of pitfalls. So, a lot of people tell me I give people permission to use drugs. My response is always, yeah, they never ask for permission. Like I'm not telling anybody they can or can't. I'm saying, well, okay, if you're not willing to have that particular form of recovery, well, what can you do? And I am extreme about it. I'm probably more extreme than most people. So if people tell me I'm willing to commit to non-infected needles, okay, all right, let's start with that. Let's start with only sterile needles, rather than, well, I found this in the bathroom at Starbucks. Okay, let's get rid of that behavior. So some of it is, I don't know. I think that we really need to expand the definition of how people are succeeding in recovery. Otherwise, it's just the same repetitive wheel spinning for decades and decades and decades. Like, you didn't care, you relapsed. Like, yeah, I mean, that's,
I think what you're talking is like harm reduction, right? So rather than going towards this sort of abstinence only model where you can either not use drugs at all, or it has to be some extreme use, right? That we can say, okay, well, why don't we make conditions for use safer? I mean, I started in my whole working career has been mostly in the HIV field, which is very harm reduction oriented. So
correct.
It may be even a little bit, again, extreme because it can go as far as, like having safe injecting sites, right?
Yes.
Which really is doing or been trying to do for a while.
Yeah.
And so caught up in
yeah. Look, I think that the HIV example is really a great thing, and I'm old enough, and and Amy, Lord knows she's old enough to remember.
Oh
this,
my
but,
God! Can I even talk at all during this thing? Jesus
yes,
Christ!
Yes, I was gonna. I thought of that actually. So I think that when the initial crisis of HIV hit, the only thing that was going to be acceptable was cessation of all sexual activity. So it was total abstinence, right? And the religious right, lots of organizations were like salivating. Yes, we can control people's sexual behaviors. It didn't go anywhere. what happened was, to arrest that virus was the knowledge, values, and skills of public health, right? So not the moral judgment. Condoms helped a lot, lots of different things helped a lot. Clean needles helped a lot, all those kinds of things. It's not really that different with drug use, right? So I always think, well, dead is dead, right? So if these people drop dead, they find no recovery of any kind. There is, and I'll let Amy, I don't know, what does the recovery community think of harm reduction? I know they don't love it, but it's one of those things, like it's a cultural thing. So Amy can, talk about that.
I mean, I think I want to comment on a couple of things that he said, because we come from, although we both got sober in AA, we have come from very different backgrounds. I mean, he, smoked weed and drank beer and got clean and got sober, 30 years ago? I was right?
Well, I got sober 23 years ago,
okay.
when a girl left me for my drinking problem.
Okay.
Like she was all upset about
it.
Yeah.
So I smoked meth, had severe mental illness, suicide attempts, was an intravenous cocaine user, abused Oxycontin, have been in 7 rehabs. It's a very, had 7 years of sobriety and relapse, had 3 years of sobriety and relapse, had a very different experience than he did with sobriety, and have been in many, many rehabs. The thing that AA was the only thing introduced to me, was the only offer. And I did do a alternative therapy in Mexico, in Tijuana, where you had amino acids, an IV of amino acids. They were going to rebalance your brain chemistry. And that's, as a recovering addict, that's our dream, is I'm going to lay here and you're going to fix it for me. Okay. Like that passivity. So there I am, and everyone is there, and they have like late stage MS or cancer. And they're like, what are you here for? And I'm like, well, I can't stop shooting cocaine. And I felt really awful. I felt like a horrible human being. People are fighting for their lives, and I'm like actively killing myself. And of course, did the amino acids work? Absolutely not. They did not. But what I found when I kept getting thrown back into AA was, I was like, okay, and I was also married at one point to someone who was a social worker and owned rehabs. And so I also got like a little bit of the Joe-ness thrown at me early on. AA, if you take out the religious component, and as a Jew, it's based in Christianity. It's 2 white Christian guys that started it. So there's many of those prayers that make me very uncomfortable. I realized that it was cognitive behavioral therapy quite early. And I thought, you can take out the religious component, and just, you're acting yourself in a right thinking, which is really, there's a scientific basis to that. It's called bidirectionality. It's neuroplasticity. It's if you do contrary action over and over and over again, you're going to create a new neural pathway in your brain that over time will become your default mechanism, and that will become you. So it works. There is science behind AA. The problem is, there's a lot of problems with AA within the fellowship, with the sexual predatory behavior, people being put off by the religiosity, people being, we hear about people saying, well, you're not sober if you're on psych meds. And I'm like, that's bananas, and you're killing people. You're making people, I've heard people get off and kill themselves or relapse. And it's like, so it's very fundamentalist. And so I speak at a lot of meetings, but I also speak my truth. And so I can ruffle a lot of feathers.
Wait, what do people think of harm reduction?
They don't like it. They think it's bullshit. They think it's fucking, they don't. You're abstinent is the holy grail. And if you're not abstinent, you're fucking not sober. That's it. And it's like, I think that we have to really look at the fact that there is a spectrum of addiction. There really is. You know what I mean? Most of the people that I was on the chain gang with had a DUI and were not alcoholics. The fact that I was arrested for felony domestic violence when I had driven around with loaded syringes in my car and sold meth on, out of my house, and it was just so ironic, So I don't know that harm reduction would have worked for me. I mean, I'm all the way over here. I can't even vape. I can't flirt with people. I am an addict to the full degree. I'm a love addict. I'm a sex addict. I'm a nicotine addict. I'm a caffeine addict. I mean, I'll take anything that takes me out of myself. I'm a nap addict. I mean, I love anything. Doesn't matter. Shopping, all of it. And it's like, so that really wasn't an option for me. So I think it has to do with what you know, where you are on that spectrum. I think that what's missing for a lot of the rehabs, at least that I went to, was why are you using? Not for also, first of all, there is a test you can take, which is to see if you have the MTHFR mutation, which I think is the one that you had people listen to, right?
Yeah.
Right. So you can take a test to test for the MTHFR mutation, the motherfucker mutation, which it really is, and which shows you whether or not you have an enzyme, you have a genetic mutation that affects you creating the enzyme that breaks down folic acid from green vegetables into L-methylfolate, which is the building block of serotonin and dopamine. So in AA, when they say you were irritable, restless, and discontent before you picked up, that's called low dopamine tone. That's what that really is. And we're not addressing that at all. So you can take an L-methylfolate supplement. Is it magic? No. Is it like shooting coke? No. Does it help? Yes. Should they be testing for it? Yes. Should they be doing tests for also what, like psych meds? 80% of people with addiction have comorbid mental illness. 80%. Like,
yeah.
Treat the mental illness. You know, I don't feel like any of the rehabs really, they threw us all in the same groups, no matter what our problems were or what our age was. No one really looked at my situation and went, okay, you've got this stuff with your mom, you've got this stuff with your dad, you've got failure to launch, you're a rich kid, you're da-da-da. Like, we need to teach you self-esteem, how to not hate yourself, how to not escape, and how to like function in the world. No one did that. I got dropped on my ass at 42 and had to do it because I was going to die if I didn't, you know?
I mean, one thing you said really stuck with me, right? About the notion of co-occurring disorders. And that phrase has always sort of rubbed me the wrong way because it assumes that substance abuse issues are not intrinsically a mental health issue, right? And we separate them out in a million ways, right? The organizing body or the regulating body is SAMHSA, right? Substance abuse and mental health. Like, it's always separated out into these two things because there's a certain level, I think, of the way that we culturally view mental illness is such that folks think that that's somehow less in your control, but addiction is something you can do something about.
No, it's not.
Like, but that separation, I think.
I mean, I don't know. When I was in my active addiction, I mean, I think that there are people who aren't bipolar, who don't have borderline personality disorder, who aren't schizophrenic, who don't have, anxious, generalized anxiety disorder, who are drug addicts and alcoholics. You can just be a drug addict and an alcoholic. You know what I mean? Or you could be self-medicating that stuff. I mean, there's a friend of mine who's coming out with a book, and he thinks his whole heroin addiction was based completely on his depression, self-medicating his depression. I think that it's so unique. I think that addiction is unique to the individual. We all come in with different sexual trauma, different biochemical stuff, different genetics. It's different for everybody, but we're treating it the same.
Yeah. I think that whole idea of the dual diagnosis or coexisting disorders, you're correct. It presumes that the substance abuse is some kind of behavioral modification puzzle. And it is not in and of itself a mental health issue. I think that, first of all, I think it is. I think that sometimes mental health issues are like a ball of knotted fishing line, and it's very hard to determine and, pull on one thread, and it's very hard to determine what is what, and what you are looking at. Every once in a while, people stop drinking, and that was the problem. Right. So for the most part, people are drinking to impairment or using some other, substance to the point of it impairing and fracturing their lives for a reason, whether it's depression, anxiety, trauma, grief, and loss, who knows? I mean, this is the other thing that I'm always telling people about, sort of the shame issue is every human on the planet has mental health issues. And if you don't now, you will. Right? Somebody will drop dead. Somebody will get divorced. Something is going to happen. People change constitutionally as we get older and move through phases of development in life. So even if you didn't have this issue as in your 20s, you might in your 40s. Who knows what it is? So it really is a more the idea of, the Jesuits would say, cura personalis. They would say the whole person, right? It's the whole person. It's the
Or say it in
context
Latin.
of, I just said cura personalis. Anyway, it's the whole person, and it's a lot of things, right? It's the context, it's our family systems, our belief systems, it's the neighborhood we live in, our zip code, where we went to school. There's a lot of things that come into all of it. And so sometimes the whole idea of, if you treat your depression, you're no longer going to be a substance user, or vice versa, is not necessarily true, right?
No.
So it's a, I don't know. I mean, I agree with you, Sameena. I feel like people want to be angry with people who use substances, and they want to blame them, and they want to, and people say, oh, that's not true. My aunt goes to AA and she says it's a disease. And I say, yes, I know, but you need to come to prison with me, because that's what we do culturally with people who have substance use problems, is we put a human in a cage. Like, think about that. And I don't know that I'll live to see the day, but some of your students might. We're going to look back at our prison systems the same way that we now look at Manzanar, and think of it as a human rights violation. Like, we should have this deep sense of shame. What is the restitution for people that we put through that culturally? Like, the idea of putting a human being in a cage because they like drugs. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, is being a drug user really the worst thing a human can be? Is that really does it get any worse than that? Like, we have to separate them from the world. And so I think a lot of what we're fighting is that misunderstanding about mental health, and Amy is exactly right. It is a range, right? We're all under a mental health strain right now because we're living through a pandemic, and we're on top of each other. And I've been staying with my mother because, and she wants to go to the mayonnaise sale because she wants to. Well, let's go. Okay, no, it's on sale. We're going to take it to Father Ponarelli at the homeless shelter. And it's like, all right, okay, this is now my life, the mayonnaise sale during the pandemic. So we're all under this kind of mental health. So sometimes it's situational, sometimes it's organic, sometimes it'll pass. Sometimes it is perfectly understandable that if there was a horrible car accident and your spouse died, that your drinking could increase, right? That doesn't make one an alcoholic. And so I just think we have to be very mindful about exactly what Amy said. Our mental health construct is as individual as our thumbprint. It's very, very different for all people. And it's very hard to put those kinds of labels on things of, you're mentally ill, or you're a substance user, or, and look, I mean, and I'm old, but these kids that tell me they're not, that gender doesn't exist and that they're whatever, they're not binary, this or that. I'm like, okay, I get it. But it kind of is the same with mental health, right? Like, you get to define it for yourself, and
Why does it matter though? I guess to me, that's the question, is really what I think that trauma impacts your brain. We know that trauma impacts your brain in the way that you process things, and your biochemistry and your neurotransmitters. Do you know what I mean? So there's that. And then there's also, like, for me, I had mad depression and an eating disorder. And then I found drugs and I felt normal. And who doesn't want to feel normal? Everyone's like, no, you can't do meth. And I was like, meth makes me feel normal. That's how fucked up my brain chemistry was. No one would listen to me. You know what I mean? And it was like, if you go back, and it's like, there is stuff that they gave amphetamines for. There are mental illness diagnoses that amphetamines were. I'm like, so of course, being the person, the manipulative drug addict I was, I would go in with all of these, papers and research papers and say, I really have this, and only amphetamines will help. And like, a couple doctors bought it. But the other point of it is, like, there's also some of us, it's a genetic component. My mother was a full-blown fall down alcoholic. My uncle was a schizophrenic speed freak. They were both addicted to amphetamines. There's a genetic component to this. When I drank, something opened up inside me. I felt differently than everyone else. I reacted differently from the very beginning. It was like a vortex opened, and I couldn't get enough. And it was kind of scary. You know what I mean? And that's not other people's experiences with anything. Like, I still will just like a 6-shot latte, and everyone's like, are you out of your mind? But it's like, nothing is enough for me. And part of that is, how many dopamine receptors do I have? How much is the dopamine sitting in the synaptic cleft? how quickly is it being sucked back in? I mean, cocaine and meth work opposite, even though they're stimulants. I mean, there's so much to this.
Well, you bring up too this interesting point about, well, psychotropic medications, and I'm not in any way trying to stigmatize the use of psychotropic medications, but in many ways they act, you know, in similar mechanisms to the way that other drugs do, right? So the same way that you would not want to cut cold turkey from having been using OxyContin, you don't want to cut cold turkey from having been on Zoloft. Right?
Oh, I've done it. Oh, no, you don't want to do that. I've done it.
Not exactly the same ways, obviously.
No, but it's not fun. It's not fun. Yeah, your brain goes bananas. Yeah.
Right, you get used to a particular state of mind, literally, right? That you can't just completely nix without having some impact. So, I mean, I think that's also the sort of just peculiarness about which drugs are legal and which drugs aren't, right? Or if it's prescribed to you, that it's afforded a different protection than if it's illicitly received, but it's the same substance.
Well, look, the drug scheduling is really, it's not, certainly not steeped in logic, right? Because cannabis is a Schedule 1 drug, cocaine and heroin are a Schedule 2 drug. So that would mean that cannabis is more dangerous than cocaine and heroin. That doesn't have any logic or science behind it. Has racism behind it, right? So Nixon didn't like hippies and Mexicans, so that's how they decided, okay, well, we're going to really criminalize their culture. It's not different than if we had said, well, I don't like the English, so tea isn't good for anybody, and tea will make people murderous freaks, and tea drinkers are just awful people. And you know, so the idea of that, I mean, it's one of the things that I think would help tremendously is if we did apply science and logic to the scheduling of drugs, you know, whether it was medicinally dispensed or whether it was, I think it should all be medicinally dispensed. But yes, I think that the idea of psychotropic medications from a psychiatrist, there are people who are having serious problems with that stuff and rationalizing it that it came from a medical professional. So that doesn't necessarily, I mean, sometimes, you know, and I'm big
I've
about
abused Provigil and stuff like that, but you know, I'm on phenobarbital and Klonopin for like epilepsy. I have a seizure disorder from the meth, from crystal meth. I have hyperactive lesions on my brain. I've had 12 grand mal seizures. I've cracked my fucking head open. I've broken teeth. I have no aura. I've lost my license twice. And the only medications that will control my grand mal seizures are phenobarbital, which is what like every person's epileptic dog is on. You know what I mean? Like when I go and pick it up at the pharmacy, they're like, "Is this for your dog?" I'm like, "No, it's for me." It's embarrassing. And like Klonopin, and never have I abused them. I'm in a place where I respect my addiction and I'm terrified of my epilepsy, and it's not triggering at all. I don't even feel that stuff anymore. But what it's caused is an enormous tolerance. But getting that stuff refilled, oh my God. You know what I mean? I mean, the amount of stuff, I have to show my license. I have to this. I can't refill it a day before. I can't get it before I travel. I'm like, do you guys understand I can die without this medication? You know, not everyone who's on medication is abusing it. And I know people who have done cocaine who aren't cocaine addicts.
Most people who do cocaine are not cocaine addicts.
Huh?
Which, by the way, I said, well, most people who do cocaine are not cocaine addicts. But by the way, you have no aura might be the most California thing I've ever heard in my life.
No, that's what it's called. That's what it's called when you have.
I thought you meant it was like
before you have a seizure.
I thought you meant it was like girls at Starbucks.
No, I'm not like
in LA
seeing
that
people's
like
like
tell you about their
spirituality.
aura.
No, it's called an aura. It's the feeling you get before you have a seizure.
Oh, okay. All right.
Is there questions? Do you want to say something?
Yeah, actually, also keeping on this medication tip, what do you think about, what are your thoughts about methadone and buprenorphine? So I ask about this because I used to, again, coming from the harm reduction field, initially I was much more in favor of methadone for a long while. And then once I started working in treatment, and saw folks really did want to quit over years and weren't able to, and were never able to taper off that last, couple of milligrams. Really changed my thoughts on it a little bit. So I just wanted to hear what you think, about those sort of opioid.
I've never been on methadone or Suboxone. I quit Ox. I just titrated off Oxy, and it wasn't a problem. Oxy didn't hook me. I didn't like it. I abused it for a couple months, and then I titrated off it, and it was not a problem. Valium was the worst detox I've ever had. In terms of what I've known from people, I know they can really help them get some sobriety if they're on it for the first couple of years. I've heard that getting off of it is worse than getting off of heroin. The last milligram is a nightmare. And then I've got I know a lot of old junkies who are just like, just kick it in prison. Like, just shit your pants and throw up and kick it. It's over in a week. And like, what, but I know people who can't stay sober without it and are on it for years. And it's like, and I know what Joe's going to say. He's going to be like, why would you get off a medication that's helping you? I do think the idea that you have to go to a clinic every morning to get methadone, that you're chained to that clinic, is so gnarly. And the fact that I've heard it's quite bad for your body. Oh, yeah.
Oh, something in the chat, yeah?
Yeah, it's about, and I brought this up to Joe before, about cannabis use, the onset of psychosis and schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. I mean, I have heard about that it's very, very, very potent now, and it's made some people psychotic. What do you see it? Do you see the question?
Yeah.
Well, let me just answer the question about maintenance and agonist therapies, right? And so it's a really interesting thing because it's a cultural thing, right? So I get a lot of kids telling me, my sponsor says I have to get off of this medication. All right, your sponsor, the plumber? What, Dave, the forklift operator? What are you talking about? What does your doctor, the doctor, say? So those medications are, in fact, medical interventions. They need to be prescribed and overseen by medical professionals. So if you're getting advice from anyone other than a licensed physician about that, think twice, right? So the issue with methadone is actually the dispensing of methadone and trying to control people who are on methadone. The medication itself is actually pretty effective. It was, under the Nixon administration, one of the most effective interventions we've ever had for heroin addiction. I'm always very suspect when these people say, well, I've got to get off this medication. And I always think, well, but why do you have to get off this medication? Well, I'm on this medication. I'm like, okay, but I don't understand, because you would inject a substance smuggled over the border up somebody's ass, and that was not a problem for you. So why is this medication a problem? Because I do think that is the sort of trickery of addiction that wants people off of medication so that they can use again. The fact is, people who are maintained on that stuff there's an 80% reduction in the death rate of heroin, of heroin or opiate dependent people. So to me, people say that to me all the time. How long do I have to be on this? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how long diabetics are going to be on insulin. I don't know how long middle-aged fat guys are going to be on control medications for hypertension or cholesterol. I imagine until I'm dead, I think I have to take those medications. So
I don't think people like that idea. I mean, it's not just, I don't think it's just,
I don't think people like,
friends that don't like the idea of medication.
I understand there are diabetics don't like the idea of insulin, but it's what they have to do to function and live in the world.
But there's also nothing equal to that for cocaine or meth addicts. We don't have anything like that.
Well, not yet. I mean, maybe there, at some point there
was
could be
Prometa or something like that. They were going to.
No, that was bullshit. Trial. That was snake oil.
No shit. Yeah, nonsense. You had flipper babies. I know. I didn't do it. I mean.
Anyway, all right. So, but the point being is, I don't think that the reason to get off of buprenorphine or off of methadone is because of the social or cultural pressures to do so. I don't think it should ever be a purity test of, are you sober or are you not sober? If your doctor says, we want to take this down for this reason, that's a good reason to do it. Or I want to live my life without medication. You are the master of your own destiny. You have informed consent about the risks you're taking for doing that, but it is an individual choice. So the question, I think, is, I don't know, if there was a medication that said, hey, look, take this, and we can diminish the death rate of leukemia by 80%, nobody would be saying, you can't take that. What's wrong with you? Nobody,
There's a
so
huge stigma around Suboxone and meth in AA.
massive.
You are not considered sober if you're on Suboxone. You're just not. You're
Correct.
considered high. You're still using.
That's
so
correct.
when you get off of it,
that is correct.
then you're clean.
Mhm.
And I mean,
So, and
I've had
again,
sponsees, and I just go, you know what? It's your recovery. It's none of my business. I've never been on that stuff. I'm not a medical expert. Like it's your decision. Like there
Well,
are people
again-
that say I'm not sober because I'm on these medications for epilepsy, and I'm like, I don't want to live my life in a helmet. So like, thank you, but like, I tried every other non-narcotic medication first, and I had
think-
a zillion seizures. You know what I mean? So it's like, I mean, I think that we need to open up the idea that there are a zillion paths to recovery. AA, smart recovery, yoga, like whatever gets you there, great. You know what I mean? Therapy, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Psych meds. I mean, there are people where running got them sober. Like, not that you're not really sober if you're not in AA.
Well, I
Even though
think
we're
that
both in AA.
well, that is the other thing is I will clarify that. I like AA on a personal level. Like, I think it's very effective. I mean, I've spent years and years and years, but I'm not on an evangelical mission or a membership drive. And I'm okay with people improving their lives in a way that was different than I improved my life. In terms of, I don't think that the medication is actually counter to the spiritual message of AA. I actually think it's very synergistic, right? So the Jesuits, again, they would say, Jesus gave you smart people to figure out medications. Like, what do you want? You want a burning bush? What do you want? What do you want? Like, don't thumb your nose at intellectual inquiry or at scientific advancement. The truth is buprenorphine is like, if you have exposed live wire in your house and the electrician caps it, you'd be very careful about taking that cap off, before the wires are, so that's kind of the way that I think about it. I think that there are actually not enough people using those medications. Not too many, there aren't too many people. And the other thing is, I think that culturally people tell me, well, it didn't work. I'm like, well, if you give it to your drummer boyfriend, no, it doesn't work. You have to do what the doctor says. So that's the other thing is a lot of people want to vilify the medication when it's actually the behavior around the medication that's the problem, not the actual medication. And with that said, talk to your doctor. I'm always like,
there's two related questions on the same methadone topic. So there's one about, can you talk more about the risks of being on Suboxone or methadone?
Mhm.
And then also, a lot of folks where I live who are on methadone have to stand in line at a very obvious clinic each day to get their dose and take it in front of the dispenser.
Yeah.
It's that standard practice where methadone.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that the risks are different for other people. And again, that's a medical question. And, I always caution people, take medical advice. Amy and I, what is it? What is it, Amy? If you give medical advice without a license?
It's a
Remind
felony.
me. Oh, right. It's a felony. So don't give medical advice as a social worker. It's a felony if you don't have a license. So going over the side effects.
People in AA, when they're like, well, you blah, blah. I'm like, I'm sorry, are you a doctor? Like, it's,
Right. Right.
And also there are a lot of crappy doctors too. So, the last person to graduate medical school is named doctor.
Yeah, they're still a doctor. Yeah. The dehumanizing stand in line, you dirty drug addict, and no, you can't take any of the medication home, even if it's Christmas or Rosh Hashanah or anything. No. You have to come every morning and stand in line, where it makes it difficult to have a job, where it makes it difficult for childcare, to return to school. It makes it very difficult for people to build a life, to utilize the benefits of their recovery when they have to stand in line for their medication. And so I think that system needs to be changed. Yeah. The actual ingestion of methadone is, I don't know. I mean, sometimes I think it's like a 68 Buick. It's like this old thing that we can probably do better with. But no, I don't think people should have to get up at 4 a.m. and take the bus across town and wear a scarlet letter and stand in the freezing cold to get medication. I don't think that would be right for cancer or diabetes or any other chronic condition or HIV or anything else that people live with.
Because people abuse it, no? Because people double up and get high or trade it or take it with a benzo or something like that. Is that not true?
Well, it's actually true of Tylenol. It's actually true of all substances. So why are we picking on opiate dependent folks, right? That yes, all people will abuse medications. We understand that. And I will say Tylenol kills 500 people a year, and buprenorphine and methadone don't kill people. So
do you want to talk about the psychosis and schizophrenia, bipolar with the use of cannabis? Because I've
yeah, it's not borne out by any research. You know, there are, look, and again, God, man, I get to pull out all the Latin. So post hoc ergo propter hoc, that which comes after is not necessarily caused by that which comes before. So the psychosis is not necessarily caused by cannabis use. There are people who have very strong and negative reactions to cannabis. It could correlate to cannabis use. That means that one is not a good candidate for cannabis use for whatever the reason that they're using it for. It does not mean that it causes psychosis.
But you think it brings out maybe a predilection?
I think it could. I think it might be one of the contributing factors. I think there are a lot of contributing factors. A lot of what I have seen when people have said, my nephew is just a normal high school boy, and then he smoked pot, and now he's schizophrenic. No, it doesn't really work that way. It's normally a very slow decline into other forms of mental illness. And I think that one of the barriers is that a big contributing factor for those kinds of issues when there is a psychotic break is family dysfunction. And so people don't really want to look at the system. You know, I mean, they always want to privately tell me, well, my wife's aunt was crazy, right? Nobody wants to actually say, okay, we better look at our system because the system is not helping our son.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I had a bunch of psychotic nervous breakdowns. I mean, that's so in my family. So I was just like, keep it interesting, people. Like, keep you on your toes. Like, I mean, it turns out I've had so many family members on both sides who committed suicide, been in asylums, old, it goes back. You know what I mean? So the genetics, I guess I wish my parents had set me aside earlier and been like, hey, you're prone to this.
Correct.
That's got correct. Major depression and major alcoholism in your family, Amy, because that stuff, because at 15, I was like binge eating and feeling depressed and didn't want to get out of bed and hated myself. And at 19, I had a total nervous breakdown and was anorexic. And by 24, I was a crystal meth addict.
And I think that family issues like that certainly matters. I think that everybody needs to know their health history. If you're prone to diabetes, if you're prone to cancer, or whatever it is that you're prone to, mental health is certainly genetic. There are very strong genetic components. So with that said, cannabis can be dangerous for some people. Millions and millions of people are perfectly safe utilizing cannabis for medicinal reasons or for sleep or for relaxation. And that's where I get in trouble, is when the recovery community says, well, they just want to get high. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's what humans like, to dial things down. I get it. I understand. That's part of the motivation. So for those very anecdotal and isolated incidents of it not being effective for people with pre-existing psychiatric issues, it doesn't make sense to vilify the substance based on, I mean, and I say, look, the diabetics can't metabolize Skittles, but they're not illegal. You can get them. But
I don't think we know. I mean, there's plenty of people who have psychotic breaks on crystal meth, and I have my grandmother, my aunt are schizophrenic. Yeah. The fact that I stayed for 17 days writing a new Bible on crystal meth and didn't have a psychotic break is like incredible. Someone asked if would you consider relapse to be part of the recovery process, or do you just start from square one? I wonder if we have what are you want to. Well, my experience is I think it's part of some people's recovery process. I see people roll into treatment or AA on a court card and get sober and never use again. That wasn't my experience. My experience was I was like, hey, I'm a drug addict, but I'm not an alcoholic. Let me try this. I was like, oh, I am an alcoholic. Oh, but maybe I'm not this, blah, blah, blah. I think it's like cancer, no one is like surprised when the cancer comes back, but everyone is surprised when addiction comes back. It's like it's never going to be in remission forever. I mean, we just saw Dax Shepard had relapse. I mean, people relapse at 19 years. You're never out of the woods. You're never safe. It's a brain thing. You know what I mean? So with the right, trauma and drama, and then you've got an injury, and they're given medication, and it wakes it up. You're fucked. You know what I mean? So it's like, in terms of, so I think it is part of the recovery process. And I learned a lot during my relapses, and I was never ashamed, and I never gave a shit what people in AA thought. I came right back, and I was like, I don't care about being queen of the drunks. Like, fuck you guys. Like, I'm back, and I'm here to save my life. And you just can't be like, I'm so ashamed. It's like, who cares? I think, or find a new meeting. But in terms of starting from square one, I started my time over. I would just keep starting my time over.
I think that is a brand of recovery, right? And so it presumes that the only goal is total cessation of all drug use. So, right? And so I think you need to bell curve, and you need to look at trends over time. And, I got a lot of heat for this because I would not kick people out of the sober living I was running in Brooklyn if they had used. And the reason would be, why would we punish people for having the problem that they came to us for help with, right? Like, and that is one thing I will tell any young social workers out there. That lake is wet, right? They will use drugs. If you're going to get mad at drug addicts for acting like drug addicts, I don't know. Find some
because it's
other area of practice. I guess, but what I think, I'm much more into compassion, not control. I expect that people will have recurrence. I expect that people will have relapse. I also don't like the idea that relapse is inherent failure. So sometimes people were using daily, and they have scaled that back to 3 times a month. Right. Well, that seems pretty good. Why don't we just keep going with that, right? So
we don't look at progress in AA at all.
No, we don't look at progress, and we don't reward progress.
You failed and you start over.
Correct.
It's not progress. Like, oh, well, hey, you just stayed out for a night, or you used to shoot dope, and you smoked weed, and you want to stay fully abstinent.
Right.
Like, that's cool. Like, you're moving in the right direction. Like, no one does that to you.
Well, if your goal is to lose 50 pounds and you lose 25 pounds, your friends congratulate you, and they tell you keep going, and they say you're doing great, and oh my God, you look wonderful, and those kinds of messages. If your goal is to scale back your drug use or whatever it is, what you're told is, well, you don't care, and you didn't pray, and come back when you're serious. And you just need to lose everything. And if you try to change those messages into other health considerations, you wouldn't say to a diabetic, well, why don't you come back when we have to amputate your foot? Because you obviously don't care, right? You would say, okay, well, what's going on? Do we need to adjust your medications, or are you working out? Or, how is it that we can manage this problem better? But you don't. It's a very tricky piece of business, but what I will say is that most people have setbacks. Most people, their recovery is not perfect. The story that the rehab industry is selling, that they went to rehab for an acute care 30-day residential treatment period, they never drink again, and now they're a counselor at their rehab, is unbelievably rare.
Yeah, but Joe, I'll tell you this. As someone until shit got really bad for me, like, I didn't want to quit until I started to have really bad repercussions, like seizures, or my parents were pulling cash out from, or were like cutting me off financially, or, like my life started to get really, like, did I have the desperation where I was like, oh, I'm going to fucking die if I don't stop doing this. Like, I had to get to that place. In the beginning, it was fun. And then it got to a place where it was like, I'm trapped in this weird prison and I'm afraid to stop. And then it got to a place where I'm like, I have to stop or I'm going to die. You know what I mean? So I think that I'm not saying you have to hit rock bottom. God, I mean, I wish what I had went through on nobody. You know what I mean? But I think that there is, you know, and I hate to be like, there's, you know, there is a gift of desperation where you're like, I'll do it. You know what I mean? And I had that when I was on the chain gang, man, at 42, running into people I knew from AA in a tan Dickie shirt with a broom. So newly sober again, having like just everything fallen apart and having tried to kill someone. I mean, it was mortifying. You know,
well, look, and I think that it's great for sure.
I think it's
there
great.
are lots of people
I
out
think
there
that
with
is
that story, but there are millions of people out there without that story. And if the traditional, you know, and I say this all the time when people get very defensive when I'm critical of the industry or the current approach or whatever, it's like, all right, well, I don't know, because there's a big body count. If we were doing a good job of this, we wouldn't drop 112 bodies a day. There wouldn't be 1,800 college kids every year dead. There wouldn't be 88,000 Americans dead, which, by the way, we kick coronavirus's ass for death. So, you know,
gay addiction. Someone has a question for
I'm
you.
just saying, if we know, so if this is going so well, if it's the solution
it's not going well.
Right, I get it, and I understand, and there are a lot of people out there who have that story, and that is the conventional wisdom. They have to hit rock bottom, cut them off, let them live in the dirt and the street and all that business. It's not really that effective as policy. It might be individually effective for people, and I do believe that people need to feel the condition of the choices that they're making. I'm all for natural consequences. I never made my boys wear a jacket in winter. They'd be like, I'm not cold. I'm like, all right, whatever. And then old ladies in Brooklyn would yell at me. Those boys are cold. And I'd be like, okay, thank you, Mrs. Schrankman. I appreciate your advice. But the
Joe,
point being
someone has a question about treatment. You were just talking about it. She said that you believe there's only 3 to 5% chance of success in recovery treatment. Is that correct? And could you speak more on that?
It is correct. And again, I think that it's a difficult thing because, again, I don't know that anybody agrees on success. I would actually expand that to more people because I don't think that relapse is inherently failure. And a lot of people do. So if you are not a totally abstinent person, you are put into the bucket of you didn't succeed in rehab. That doesn't mean that your life didn't improve. And I'll give this anecdotal example. There was an older man who came to me who was effectively drinking himself to death, and his wife had passed away. She had breast cancer. He's a big dude. He's my size and highly inebriated at some family function and knocked over the baby high chair, and just disaster. And so they did what they knew. They took him to Betty Ford. He walked out and he went to the driving range. He was like, I'm not going to any of those goddamn meetings. And I was like, okay. We got him on medicinally dispensed cannabis and off of scotch. He lost 30 pounds. His blood pressure dropped. He agreed to sell this big house that was in disrepair and buy a condo. He agreed. We taught him Uber. So we took his driver's license. Like, all these really great things happen. He is still in the you failed bucket because he's not drug free. And so I think that it's a very hard thing. I mean, I don't know that we actually know. And one of the things that I think that brings up is the marginalization of people with addictive disorders. We don't really know nearly enough. And that question about cannabis and psychosis, if it were not a Schedule I drug, we could unleash research hawks at Stanford and Cal and at Fordham and everywhere else. And then we could tell you. We could tell you empirically that you're not a candidate for this or you are a candidate for this. But given those restrictions, we can't do it. So I think that a lot of the definitions of success are cultural and expectations for families. I feel like my 75-year-old, I'm like, look, man, look here, Uber, you can get to Dodger Stadium. It's actually really cool. You don't have to park. So like, he was really into it. And there was all these really great things that happened. So I don't know. It's a very hard thing. I think that we have to expand the offerings for people who have mental health issues rather than, and Dr. Wetzman said this, and if you want to, you can listen to the podcast when he was on with a guest. He's like, well, but it's the only area of healthcare where we don't ask the individual what their goals are, right? So people come into mental health treatment or substance misuse or whatever it is, and we tell them what their goals are. Like, this is what's going to happen. We don't say, well, what do you want to do? And, and so, yeah, it's a very, very difficult question to have that binary system of success or failure. And it can't be just a positive or negative drug string. That can't be the only metric.
No, I totally agree, and I hope that is where the field progresses, because I think for the most part it is still very much an abstinence-only model in most places, right? Whether it is 12-step or whether we're talking about treatment centers, they all kind of operate under that general paradigm. And just to shift gears, we have a few more minutes, not too much longer, but I wanted to get your feelings, both of you, on how you feel things have changed in terms of, or not, maybe stay the same, through the pandemic for folks' desires, cravings to use, to relapse, or stopped using, right? Like to exacerbate that. Even folks, as you were mentioning, Joe, who do not necessarily have an underlying substance use issue, when there's traumatic things going on, as there are many traumatic things going on right now, there is a to want to escape a little bit. So yeah, your thoughts about that, like how folks responded to the pandemic, to the election, to just all of this continuing angst, like now.
Yeah, Amy, what do you think? I mean, what do you?
I've seen a lot of people relapse. I've heard about some suicides. I myself have experienced extraordinary depression. Just even the other day, I had that. I thought, and I'll be 8 years clean and sober in January. And I was like, I gotta fucking check out. Like, I need to use. And I was like, oh, okay, there's that thought. That's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. We're not gonna do that. But like, that is always my go-to. Do you know what I mean? Suicide, I just kill myself or I'll get high, are my exit plans from anything that becomes too painful. I know that isolation lowers your dopamine levels, and the fact that we're now forced to isolate and we don't have person-to-person contact, we don't have person-to-person meetings and all that kind of stuff. For me, it's really like when my roommate was here, I was doing much better. He left and I just fell into the deepest depression, like where I was like, do I need to be hospitalized? Like, what's happening? And I also quit vaping during the pandemic, which was horrible. Yeah, and that was like probably not the best idea I've ever had. But yeah, it's been, and I see people, I mean, who I have friends that are normies, and we know that porn has gone up. We know that people are eating more. We know that people are drinking more. We know that people are drinking during the day. There's day drinking. There's mommy drinking. There's this. There's that. There's drug use has gone up. And so it's like, even, I mean, whether these people will come out of the pandemic and have an addiction, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Can you drink yourself into having alcoholism? Sure. Yeah. Just like you can get addicted to pain pills if you take them for too long. You'll have a physical addiction, whether or not you have a psychological addiction. So I see people in the recovery community really struggling. I've seen people really, really take a dive. I've seen a lot of relapses. I've seen a lot of struggles. And it's the perfect combo of fear, insecurity, ambiguity, financial issues, and isolation, which makes everyone want to just check out.
I totally agree. There's not a lot of absolutes in this, but be not idle, be not alone, right? We know those are kind of absolutes for any mental health issue: anxiety, depression, substance misuse. So do something, and do it with somebody. The something and the somebody to be determined based on individual need. But I agree with what Amy said, is that we are culturally, and from a larger viewpoint, we're alone and we're not doing anything. So, and this is, I was at Whole Foods with my mask, and I've gotten to be old enough now where I'm just like that boundaryless old man that wants to comment on everything. And so there was this kid in line. He wasn't a kid, he was a kid to me. He had a jar of peanut butter, a loaf of bread, and a bottle of vodka. And I said, are those your groceries? And he was like, I know. And I said, okay, well, and I gave him my number, and like, that just didn't look good to me at all. And I think that there are a lot of people in that. I do think that there are few things that I've seen with people who are in recovery that will exacerbate their issues, like time with family, right? So even running the sober living every year, oh no, it's going to be fine. I'm going to go to my parents for Thanksgiving. I'll take the train. Every year they come back crying and drunk. And so this kind of thing where you're sort of thrust into these situations where we're all on top of each other, we're all on edge. We all have, us in LA and you and in New York, none of us can believe that 50% of the country wants more Donald Trump. So there are lots and lots and lots of stressors that are going on that are probably not there otherwise. I feel like we have a couple of years to unravel the mental health issues that we're experiencing that are sort of germinating, privately now. And I think that a lot of people are hiding out, right? So if you just have to get on Zoom for 15 minutes with your boss a day, and then, back to the couch in your jammies with your peanut butter and bottle of vodka, that's not going to help. And so it's a really, really hard situation. I think that, San Francisco, which is, I'm there a lot, more people are dying of overdose than of the coronavirus. So, that's obvious, it's an outlier community because people
work for actually their public health department. Yeah, it's a really solid health department. So they've gotten the COVID.
It is. And that is true. Okay, I'll give them that. I mean, they're very cautious about that and mandated masks and stuff, but it still just kind of jumped out at me like, wow, okay, well, what's going on? I mean, because it's never hard, like drug use in that particular community is always like right there on the surface. But it does seem to have spiked from the pandemic. And so I don't know. I think it's really hard to determine what it is that we're looking at long term. And it's destabilizing. My older boy, he called and he's like, well, they're closing school. And I was like, really? So you're coming here with all your dirty shit? Oh, okay. And we weren't prepared. Right? I mean, there was supposed to be graduation in May, and then he was supposed to come home, and then he was supposed to start his job. He had this job as a researcher at UCLA, and then none of that happened. And then it's like, so it's just a lot of these sort of domino effects that are permeating family systems, and it's hard. It's hard for sure.
Yeah.
You want to hit that last question from Kate?
Me? Are you talking to me?
Any of us?
How do we change big systems, big alcohol, and help change the recovery industries, move toward real multifactorial change? We are essentially all realizing the system sucks and we can't do anything as lowly clinicians, nurses, counselors.
Well, I don't think that's true. I think that, and I say this a lot, like Amy was like, I don't know if anyone listens to our podcast. And I said, I don't know, but there was only like 10 people at the Sermon on the Mount. And it all worked out. So I don't think the thing is to feel like you're a lowly clinician or you can't do anything, or I'm just a nurse, or I'm just a social worker. I think we all have a voice. One of the things that I think is important is trying to hold the alcohol industry to account, which we
actually had Chris Swanger on, the head of the spirits lobby, and we had him on, and we were amazed he came on because we've invited lots of different people on, and they're just like, we don't have anyone available. And I'm like, oh, really? Out of the 25 top fight, you have one person for 30 minutes, really? And he came on, and I absolutely applaud him for having the balls to come on. He was terrified of me, and I'm the nice one. He's the asshole. So I was like, but it was extraordinarily clear that he did not understand alcoholism, and that he didn't want to punish the responsible consumers by raising taxes. And I'm like, I don't think that anyone who's buying a $40 bottle of bourbon gives a shit about a 40-cent tax raise. And he was like, one part of responsibility.org, and that's for drunk drivers, and we're like helping kids make good choices. And I said, the fact that you even use the word choice regarding addiction makes me think you don't even understand addiction at all. And the fact that you're talking about also binge drinking in college, that's a phase that most people just like. Most of the people that I binge drank with in college are totally normal. They're married. They're lawyers. They have 2.5 kids. I'm the one that became a drug addict. Not, you know what I mean? So that's a stage. He didn't really.
They live in the valley.
He was like, we give this much billion in taxes, and we were like, but you caused this much in damage.
Correct. That's the thing where I think he was really not happy with me, is when he said, well, we generate, $200 million in revenue for communities. I'm like, I know, but you cost $400 million. So you owe the taxpayer $200 million. So the truth of the matter is that we could change this with a 10-cent tax raise on distilled spirits, beer, and wine. In other words, we could have a public option for anybody who wanted to go to treatment.
And not responsibility.org. I mean, again,
it's not a crazy idea.
That's
in California,
so easy. That's so trite and surface. Like, they got a DUI. You know what I mean?
Well, they're trying to treat a very complex problem with platitudes and bumper stickers, and it doesn't really go that well. So I think
I was 19, and then it was like, woo! It was a fucking snowball. I mean, I wanted to tell this Kate. I will tell you something. I've been in a lot of treatment centers. I've been in quite a few, and the way that you treat, I'm going to cry. There was a lot of techs treated me like, even though they were in recovery themselves, like had 2 years and were like, I'm in recovery and I work at a thing and I'm a tech at and it's like, okay, calm down, dude. A lot of them treated, they're like, here's your crazy pills. And I was like, okay, that's not very cool. There was one tech who treated me and looked at me and treated me like the person he knew I could become. Mm-hmm. And I recall that he treated me with dignity and saw me like who I could become when I came out of that, extraordinarily depressive, alcoholic, self-destructive. I was cutting and whatever. I will always remember him. I have thanked him. He gave me a glimmer of hope and made me feel dignified and gave me like, oh, maybe I can get out of this, instead of treating me like some throwaway crazy junkie that wasn't going to get better, that was just going to, and rehabs make money when you relapse. They make money on you coming back in. They don't make money when you get it together. You're a great speaker for their alumni.
Yeah, it works the same for psychiatric institutions, right? So
correct.
For cycling in and out of psychiatric emergency for suicidality.
Oh God, I've had 4 of those 5150s. Men love it it's really popular on dating sites. They love it.
So any last parting words of advice for our budding social workers and other folks who are
There was one more question. I don't know what the new Jim Crow is. Have you read the new Jim Crow, Joe?
I have. It's Michelle Alexander's book. Yeah. What is there a question about it?
She just
as I was going to ask before, but thought I had to wait until the end. It might be a little off topic now, but Joel, have you read the new Jim Crow? So the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. The new Jim Crow is about mass incarceration and how the drug war, the price is paid by people of color, right? So, and this is one of the things that I see a lot is, if you live in Greenwich, Connecticut, and you use powder cocaine, your life is probably okay. If you live in a community of color and you use compressed rock cocaine, you can be sentenced to long terms in jail for the same behavior and ingesting the same substance.
Well, we wrote a piece about this. We wrote a piece about this called "White People Go to Rehab and Black People Go to Jail."
Correct.
And it highlighted completely about the racism within the treatment industry, within AA, and within the justice system.
Well, and one of my new targets is for-profit prison boards.
Oh yeah, he doesn't.
And
like
they're.
I mean,
I just felt like the fact that there's
a
profit
margin, and
now
he's going to just destroy them. He's really mad.
I mean, and you look at the board of a for-profit prison enterprise, right? So people who make money and are dependent on the drug war for effectively customers, right? It's all white, it's all male, and it's all business oriented. There are not healthcare officials.
No one's been criminal justice. Everyone's like a lawyer, worked in
everybody's a lawyer. Everybody has an MBA. Everybody's like, how do we make money? Which is, I understand that's the nature of business in America. However, the idea of funneling people into prison, and I say this one a lot, and I know this for a fact because I had a son graduate from Georgetown. Georgetown's $67,000 a year, and Rikers is $87,000 a year. Not that everyone at Rikers can go to Georgetown. I understand that. However, I do think that the $87,000 to keep somebody at Rikers because they smoked weed in the park is absurd, right? And so that is what the new Jim Crow is. Basically, it's just vertical slave quarters and marginalizing people of color. And I see it all the time. Like the whole idea about the opiate crisis, it is true. However, there's always been a heroin problem in America. It just used to only be in communities of color. And until it became into suburban white neighborhoods,
pharmacy, white boy, yeah.
Right. It became a disease when your kid or the kid that you knew a kid from when your kid played Little League, when it began to infect those communities is when heroin use became a disease. So I think a lot of it is, look, I think everybody's a racist. I do. Like, I mean, you're probably all too young to remember Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but there was a teacher who was convinced that every student was smoking weed. So I'm like that guy. I'm like, what are you people?
Oh my God.
Are you people on dope? What are you doing? So, yeah.
That's going to win, I think, a different crowd of folks. The argument that it's costing the system, the public system, too much money. So
it's not working. It's not working.
I mean, I think there's the empathic response to say, like, this is wrong. We shouldn't be incarcerating folks for using drugs. But if that doesn't appeal to everybody, that argument, right? You can also say, well, look how much money we're spending on this.
Right.
Well, and I can send you the links of me on Fox News, which is kind of ironic. I don't know why they call me so often, but they do. And I've made this argument a million times that this is actually an issue for the right. It's not really an issue for the left. So in other words, if you are a small government, fiscally responsible conservative, there is not larger or more wasteful government than the drug war. If you are a Christian-based ethic conservative, there's nothing Christian ethic about breaking up families. If you are there's a million different portals into the basic philosophy of conservatism in America that aligns with ending the drug war. If you are government can't tell me what to do. Well, how can they tell you what to put into your own personal body? And conservatives love that message. They don't like it when I say, of course, you'd have to come up with a new justification to arbitrarily round up Black young men and put them in a cage. That's when Fox News says, well, thank you so much for coming. We have to, we're out of time, right? So, I mean, it's a sticky issue, but and the truth of the matter is, and I am I'm a lefty, Jesuit educated. The left hasn't done a good job with this either. We've let this go on far too long. And so we could do a whole thing on Michelle Alexander's book, but I'll stop.
This Brianna's is, how do we get the word out? How do we help other people see that are people that are vulnerable and newly sober, see that there are more options than just AA? I mean, what I'd like to say is that, if AA doesn't work for you, that's cool. And to support that and to point them to, there's Refuge Recovery, there's TLC. I lead a meeting from 280 people every Friday. There is Smart Recovery. There is, all kinds of different stuff. And it's just like, not like, because if A is not working for you, you're not doing it right. I think that, opening up the whole idea of like, whatever works for you is great. I don't understand the splintering within the recovery community, even with the harm reduction. I think we all need to get into the same tent, under the same tent. It's like, your AA, cool. Your Smart Recovery, cool. Your Refuge Recovery, awesome. Your Suboxone, awesome. Harm reduction, cool. Like, we're all trying to get the same thing, which is to keep people from dying and improve their life, whether they're using it or not. Like, the whole holier than thou purist thing is, I see that in AA, and it's like, I don't think that's helpful. I see people that go from smoking meth, to like, being vegan and CrossFit, and they're like, really, you know what I mean? Like, you see them cut out cigarettes, and you see them cut out coffee, and they see them cut out sugar, and it's like, it's not a purity competition, man.
Well, I think that one of the things, and here's where I'll get myself into a lot of trouble, but it's okay. If you randomize the sampling of people, of say 100 people, and 50 were sent to AA 3 nights a week, and 50 were sent to play bridge with people who were not drinking 3 nights a week, the results would be the same. So what's important is community, and that people connect to something, and there's consistency and reliability. It doesn't need to be AA. It can be. And if AA is effective for you, that's great. And so I think that we have to change the messaging into mutual aid is important, community is important. How are you going to find that? You know, we can give you some suggestions, but the truth is people find it in church, they find it in other communities, they find it in a bunch of different ways. And so I think that that needs to be, that AA is one of the ways that people find that. It's not the only way, and it's not, AA is not a magical solution. You know, it really isn't. And it should stop being presented as that. And I think that's,
again, that community, that connection, that there's a science and what's been talks about it. When you are with other people and you feel connected, your dopamine rises.
Of course.
When you don't feel alone. And I think that that's part of the problem with the pandemic. Even when you go to the grocery store, you've got a mask on and everyone is walking 6 feet away from you. I mean, I've never felt so disconnected from people in my life. It's like, you know, so if I mean, I'll have a conversation with the person at the register because I'm so hungry for human contact. Like, how's your day? Your eyelashes look amazing. Like, are you doing okay? You know?
Yeah. Do you want to you can take my mother to the mayonnaise sale. So Father Ponarelli has enough for the homeless shelter. If you really need connection. Well, oh yeah, mayonnaise. Well, you know, sure.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this, especially in the
oh my God, our honors, for real.
Oh, Amy, happy birthday!
Tomorrow,
happy
51.
birthday.
Oh,
happy birthday!
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much, and I will make sure that folks have a link to your podcast. We'll send something out post. Thank you again. If you want to say anything before we wrap it, you can, or we'll call it a night.
Any parting words, Amy?
Compassion, man.
Right.
Patience and compassion.
Yeah.
We're all humans. And I guess my experience is like everything that I thought was over there and happened to other people happened to me. And that created an ability for me to go, oh my God, we're all the same. And under the right or wrong circumstances, you also could do this or be this. And so that gave me a lot of allowed me, you know, cause I had to forgive myself, and it allowed me a lot more compassion. I think people go, I'm better, you know. It's like, I mean, I don't know, I got really humbled and my ass handed to me. So I mean, my father still can't watch, he still can't hear. I'm like, he doesn't think of, he still can't. He's like, I don't want to hear about you being a drug addict every day. And my mother has dementia, so it's kind of like whatever. But I don't think they see it as a scientific thing or a clinical illness, and there's nothing I can do about it. You know what I mean? I'm trying to help people, feel less alone and less ashamed. You know, that's all I can do is be honest with my story and be vulnerable and go, you're not alone. Don't be ashamed. This is what we do. Your secrets aren't that special. You know,
you're not alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's a good positive note to end on. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Sameena.
Yeah, this was a real treat. Okay, more.
Thank you, Sameena. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great. And you used to be in New York. I thought I was going to connect with you, but locally.
I did. Well, I was in New York I'm kind of back and forth. My younger boy is still in New York, and I had this idea that we could incorporate medicinal cannabis into treatment. So I came to California, and you know, I thought the recovery community wasn't quite ready for that idea. So you know, they kind of like, what? You what? But anyway, that's for another day. So anyway, I'm back and forth a lot, but I'm in LA at the moment.
Nice. That's actually where I grew up, LA. So
okay.
All right,
oh, cool.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks.